What's up, everyone? This is Matt from surfcitytcg here with a brand new deck guide for you. This one is on Six, my favorite new commander from Modern Horizons 3. Six is a 2/4 legendary Treefolk with reach that says whenever they attack, mill 3 cards, and then you can take a land from among those 3 that were milled and put it into your hand if you hit a land, if you're not ultra unlucky like I often am. And then also, as long as it's your turn, non-land cards, permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. And just a refresher on what retrace is, it allows you to cast that spell from your graveyard by discarding a land in addition to paying other costs. So basically turns every land you have into your hand, like ones that Six gives you, for example, into a, let's call it a coin to replay any card from your graveyard at any point, at least on your turn. So you can't enable, unfortunately, any flash shenanigans with Six because it does say as long as it's your turn, stuff in your graveyard has retrace, sadly. But this is a really interesting commander regardless, and it's so the style of this deck is very much toolbox. You can put in and by the way, like the way you build this deck is totally up to you. I'm going to give you some ideas and show you what I'm running and what's been working for me, but just the nature of this commander is super interesting. It allows you to play like all sorts of interesting and unique cards as long as they're permanents, because if you can get them into your graveyard, then it's just like they're in your hand as long as you've got land to discard. So let's talk through a few things, including like what the playstyle of this deck is like, what our game plan is going to be. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about what I feel the power level of this deck is. The way I have it built is pretty highly optimized for what it can do. Obviously, I'm not a EDH player, so most of my decks fall in this sort of high 7, low 8 power range. I don't like to play with a lot of infinites. My LGS doesn't allow infinites, and I personally don't find them all that fun. But there's certainly a couple that you could work into this deck, and it could make the deck a little bit more powerful. But what I'm going for is just kind of a high medium powered sort of build. So, and I feel like in general, Six has a very powerful effect. It's a really strong thing to have in the command zone. Allows you to utilize your entire graveyard almost as though it were in your hand. So Six has a lot of potential as long as you're shooting for this sort of power level, if that makes sense. And then in terms of difficulty to play, I want to talk about that. I'd say this is a medium difficulty commander. There are not a lot of super complicated stack interactions or rules knowledge things, but the nature of the deck being sort of a toolbox and a lot of times you can have a ton of different lines you can take because you've got access to your entire graveyard, right? So like at any given point in the game, you have so many decisions to make, so many things to keep track of, and if you're not a player that is good at understanding the board state and understanding what might be most helpful for you in this any given moment, this isn't necessarily the deck for you because there are going to be tons of options like that. But if you are a very skilled player and you're very familiar with the deck and familiar with the board state and the meta and like the commanders you're playing against, you're going to find Six to be a ton of fun because it gives you so many options and it lets you play games and pull games out of nowhere that you thought maybe you couldn't have a chance at. So I'd say pretty high skill ceiling on this deck, but if you want to challenge yourself, try it out. It's tons and tons of fun. So let's get into what this deck is trying to do and how the game plan might progress. So I'm going to flip over. Oh, by the way, before I move on, I want to talk about the cost of this deck real quick and also kind of how to view decks in Moxfield, how to make them your own. I get a lot of questions about this, like, oh, why is this deck so expensive? And I do have a lot of fancy versions of cards and signed cards, and I'm sure if you've seen my videos, you know that I like the bling. But that doesn't mean that the deck has to be expensive if you want to build it, and you don't, like, certainly, like, it's not actually this much money, this $1,600. You can see my blingometer here is 83%. And it's actually probably a little higher than that because a lot of the non-foil cards are signed. So if that counts as bling, then, which of course it does. Are you crazy? But, if you want to build this on a budget, what I'd recommend is go to my deck list, which I'll provide in the link below. I'm also going to provide a link to my Discord. Highly encourage you to join. And probably should have said this earlier, but please like the video. It takes just a second. This is a lot of work to produce, and this isn't my day job yet. Hopefully someday. But for now, I really appreciate all the encouragement and the comments I get. Like, I don't get a lot of comments, but when I do, I really appreciate those, and they're very meaningful to me. So please leave me a comment. Please leave me a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know how I can improve and what kind of you want to see more of. But yeah, if you take my deck list and then go to duplicate, so just click on the more drop down box here, hit duplicate. You can name it whatever you want, and you can copy my card tags too if you want, which is probably helpful because that took me a lot of time to get all these added. And, I'm going to talk through some of those in a minute, but I would recommend you do this unless you've got your own already. And then hit duplicate. It's going to give you an exact copy of my deck list. And then what you can do is go to more, and you can say, hey, Moxfield, can you just show me the cheapest version of everything? And it's going to say, are you sure? This action cannot be undone. Sure, I'm sure. I just made a copy of the deck, so I could do this. And look at that. The deck is all of a sudden half the price as it was. And what you might see too is like if we add pricing data, so if we go to advanced, let's include price, you're going to see that the bulk of this amount is clustered in just a few very high dollar cards. So if I switch the grouping to no grouping, so it's not separating it by creature, blah, 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 and then I say, let's sort by price. And let's look at what are the highest dollar value cards in this deck, and could we substitute them out? And you'll see that, first of all, I'm playing these, what is this? Infinity? Yeah, Infinity, the non-planetary basics, which I think are pretty cool. But you don't need $27 worth of forest to play this deck. You don't need to play Lotus Veil, Nykthos, Yavimaya Hollow, and Ancient Tomb. And all of a sudden, if you cut all of these lands and just replace them with forests, which are going to work just fine, I'm not going to tell you that they're as good because they're just not. But, Magic is pay to win to some extent. Deal with it. Or proxy. But, I'd say all of these cards below Prismatic Vista are replaceable. Craterhoof is replaceable, especially if you don't want to run this ugly AF version from the kids dying special lair or secret lair or whatever it was. You don't need all of these expensive lands to play a monocolored deck. You just don't. Now, I have them, so I'm going to play them. They're good. This is a lands deck. It's a toolbox deck, and they are going to come in handy, but you definitely do not need all these lands. So if you want to build my decks on a budget, that is totally possible. And I help people all the time. And if you join my Discord, we have a constant discussion, deck help, card discussion, and people often ask me hey, how can I change out this deck so it fits a $100 budget, a $500 budget, whatever you want to stick to, it can work. Magic's got tons of options now. No one can accuse them of not having a lot of options because, man, we're getting slammed with new product all the time, right? So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're building the deck. You don't need to spend all the money. The deck can still be really powerful. So anyway, enough on that. Back to the main topic. So I'm back to my regular deck list here, and I'm going to switch over to grouping by my types and tags so we can see all the main categories of the deck, the things we care about the most, those being, first of all, the lands, those are already separated out, but what we're concerned about is the mana and ramp, the card advantage, card draw engines, card draw spells, and then removal. So those are the main categories I want to look at. But I guess one more quick thing before we jump into that is this is a 3-mana commander, right? So this is something I want you to always think about before you start building a deck. And by the way, I am working on a deck building video, a how to build a deck from scratch video. It's a complicated topic, and it's something that takes me, to be honest with you, hours and hours, and I put a lot of thought into my decks. And when I say that, I mean it literally. There are times when I'm just sitting there, maybe watching TV or going on a walk or something, but I'm thinking about what is making this deck work, or what is making it not work, or what are the things that went right or wrong. And given games, and it's a constantly evolving process for me. And I'm not telling you that you have to put that much time or energy into things, but that is my process, and it does take me that much time. So when people have been asking me, and I've gotten this request quite a lot, like, hey, can you make a video about how you build a deck? It's been tough for me to conceptualize how to do that, because I don't want to just give you the answer of, well, just think about it for 800 hours. Duh. Because I realize that that is not necessarily super helpful for everyone. So bear with me. I am working on it. It does take me a lot of time to think through things and actually produce this content, because I want to be thoughtful about it and I want to make sure it's useful for you. And believe it or not, I do try to edit myself and keep on a schedule, but I tend to be a little bit long-winded when it comes to talking about Magic, because I love it and I could talk about it for hours. And I know not everyone necessarily wants to see that, so I try to find a happy medium for you. So let's switch over to types and tags. So anyway, long story short, deck building guide is coming soon, DM. Okay, so let's look at mana and ramp first. Oh, right, I got sidetracked, but 6 is a 3 mana commander, right? So what does that mean? It means that in order to ramp this out, like if we want to get 6 out as early as possible, which I think we do in this case, like this is a commander you want to get online as fast as you can. Green has precious few ways to give haste. And this is a commander that wants haste because you want to get that attack trigger to get your mill engine going. So really our best option in lieu of giving haste, which we've got a couple ways to do it, but they're really not going to come online fast enough for the first cast of the commander. So in lieu of that, what we can do instead, what green is great at, is ramping. Because if we can play 6 on turn 2 instead of on turn 3, that means we can attack with it on turn 3, which is kind of like giving haste in a way, right? As long as it doesn't die before your next turn, which is pretty unlikely. I mean, I'd say this is a relatively non-threatening commander. It's not that it isn't scary or good, but usually people are playing things or commanders that are scarier looking than a mono green deck, in truth and in actuality. So I think 6 relatively safe. In fact, I'm not running a ton of protection spells for the same reason, because people tend to just not bother it. And if they do, or if it gets swept up by an incidental board wipe, recasting it is not so hard because we're playing tons of mana and ramp because we're a mono green deck. So all that being said, I think 1 mana ramp is at an ultra premium in this deck because it allows us to play 6 on turn 2. So we want as many ways as possible to land 6 on turn 2. And that's what we should be mulliganing for, and that's how we should be building our deck. So you'll see that I've done that when we look at our mana and ramp sources and see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them allow us to, if we land them on turn 1, allow us to play 6 on turn 2. And that is a very, very impactful and powerful way to start the game. So I'd say if you're keeping a hand that doesn't have a 1 mana, especially on your first 7, if it doesn't have a 1 mana ramp source, you better have a damn good reason for keeping it. And if you're not taking enough mulligans, and we're going to do some mulligan practice and some like hand testing at the end of this video before the gameplay video, but I would tell you that in general, I don't know you, but you're not taking enough mulligans. Take more mulligans. It's not that bad. Going to 6, not that bad. You know what's bad? Keeping a mediocre 7 and doing nothing for the first 4 turns, or like saying like, oh, I hope I'll draw land, in the first 3 turns, 4 turns, it'll be fine, right? What happens if you don't? Like, is your next hour and a half completely ruined? And is that worth it to have 1 extra card in your hand? Flip this around and say, like, is it worth ensuring that you get to do nothing for like 5 turns in a row, but you get to draw 1 extra card? Like, what if I told you, like, hey, you're not going to get to play anything for the first 6 turns, but I'm going to let you draw 1 extra card this game? Would you agree? Because that's what you're doing when you keep a shitty 7 versus going to 6. Like, you get to take the worst card of your 7. You know, if you mulligan down to 6, you get to draw 7 cards, take the worst card, this card like that you don't care about, probably, it doesn't really matter, put it on the bottom. That's not that big a deal. Just do it more often. You will be so much happier. Get a playable hand. Ensure that you can play the game early. There's so much card draw in Magic, so much card advantage that goes around. Going to 6 is not that bad. Going to 5 is not that bad. Going to 4, pretty bad. But still, think about it. A lot of times, and I'm not kidding, and I track my games, so I know this. When I go to 5, I win more often because people underestimate you. They think like, oh, you're down and out. I'm not going to attack you. I'm going to give you a card draw like spell. You know, they cast something like a Secret Rendezvous, which has to choose a player to draw 3 cards. All of a sudden, you were chosen when you wouldn't have been otherwise. And now you're up a card. You know, I'm not saying that's going to happen every game, but there are benefits, and they can be hard to quantify sometimes, for going to 5. Not only do you get a better hand, get a playable hand, ensure that you can do something that game, but you get some sort of like grace from the other players, right? This is a social game. So make sure that if you do go to 5, you got to act a little butthurt about it so that you get that advantage from your opponents. Unfortunately, my play group knows better, and they just kind of laugh and attack me anyway. Which, I'm not going to say it's the wrong play, but I don't like it. Anyway, we're running a ton of mana in ramp here. This is the way of Commander nowadays. Like, if you're not running 10, 15, even 20 sources of mana in ramp, your deck's just going to be too slow. It's unfortunate. I don't necessarily like this is the direction the game is going, but there are so many great options, so many good cards, so much good card advantage that like the only barrier to making your deck better tends to be like, man, I just run out of mana. It's not that like you run out of cards anymore. It used to be that like card advantage was king, and that's still true. But now the game has gotten to such a speed that you need to be playing for tempo. You need to be playing ways to generate a lot of mana in order to keep up, or a board wipe that's gonna like 5 for 1 in your favor. This is in a way a source of mana advantage, right? Because if you spend 3 mana on a Toxic Deluge and wipe 25 mana worth of creatures, you just got a 22 mana advantage over your opponents. So think about cards and plays and all sorts of stuff like that in those perspectives, and I think you'll do better and you'll improve as a player. So we're running tons of ramp, we're running lots of ways to get 6 out on turn 2. If you have to mulligan down and you can't get one of these, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. You play 6 on turn 3 and you'll be fine. And honestly, like, we're running 35 land, which is kind of a lot for a 3 mana commander. I'd say in general, people don't run enough land. However, in this deck, 6 gives us a way to get land immediately. As soon as it starts attacking, you're pretty much not going to miss land drops. Now, there are going to be times where you whiff on the mill 3 and then return a land to your hand. It's going to happen, right? We've got approximately 33% of the deck as land right now, 35 out of 100. But just because we have 33% and we're milling 3 cards, which means statistically we should get a land every time, doesn't mean we will. Sometimes you're going to mill 3 land, sometimes you're going to mill 0 land. So like, it does suck when you miss, but don't like dwell on it too long. Like it will happen, and just deal with it and move on. So that's the game plan, right? We're going to ramp out 6 as fast as possible. Then what? Well, it's hard to answer that then what question, because this is a toolbox deck by nature, right? The point is that we are able to flex and do whatever we need to do given who we're playing against, what the commanders are that we're going up against, what we need to do, what removal we need. Maybe we need to find some way to just generate a bunch of value and get like additional lands in play every turn because we know it's going to be a long game against some control decks, or like they're running a lot of counters or whatever. But really, you need to make the decision on what to do next after 6 is out based on what's happening in the game. And it's hard to kind of just tell you what to expect from that regard. But I'd say in general, what you're trying to do is set up some value engines. So like get a way to play some additional lands every turn, get a draw spell or draw engine going. Like these can be really helpful. Get a way to get lands back. So there's a critical card that I would not skip out on in this deck. I'd say like in general, you can play mostly whatever you want in this deck, right? As long as it's a lot of permanence. But there's a card that I think that you should invest in and ensure that you have in this deck. I'd say there's only one card that's like a must-have for running this deck. And you could play it without it, but I would not recommend it. It's critically important, and this is the deck for this card. Astute viewers might already know what I'm talking about, but if not, the card is Life from the Loam. So let's talk a little bit about this gem from Original Ravnica. So Life from the Loam is a sorcery, and you might say, hey Matt, like didn't you just say don't run a lot of instants and sorceries? Well, yeah, in general, but this is a little bit of a weird one, so let's talk about it. So Life from the Loam is 1 and a green for a sorcery, and it says return up to 3 land cards from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty simple, right? Just get any 3 land, up to 3 land, out of your graveyard, back into your hand. Great to fuel 6's retrace ability, to ensure that you don't miss land drops, all sorts of stuff, right? It's a 2 mana draw 3, essentially, if you've got 3 lands to choose from in your graveyard. So that's an amazing rate. You know, this is practically an ancestral recall that doubled the mana. Just kidding. Sort of. But then the real power of this card lies in that second ability, Dredge 3. Dredge, famously broken mechanic, still a powerhouse in the vintage format and maybe Legacy? I don't know. I know there's a lot of banned cards in both Legacy and Modern because of Dredge. Dredge says, anytime you would draw a card, so this is a replacement effect on your draw, any draw. So anytime you have a card that says draw a card, you draw for your draw step, anytime, right? You can choose to instead dredge. So if this card is in your graveyard, it has Dredge 3. You can say, all right, on my draw step, instead of drawing, I'm going to replace my draw with Dredge, which it does 2 things. It returns this card to your hand, and then it forces you to mill 3 cards. And that's it. You don't draw on your draw step, or if you're drawing a card for some other reason, like let's say you have a Toski in play, right? And you hit your opponent with 4 creatures, right? You would draw 4 cards. If you've got 1 Life from the Loam in your graveyard, you could dredge 1 and then draw 3. You could draw 3 and then dredge 1. You can't dredge more than once unless you've got more than 1 dredge card in your graveyard. So that's how dredge works. And once you've got a Life from the Loam in your graveyard and your graveyard is relatively full, you're pretty much going to want to be dredging it back to your hand every time you can versus just drawing a card. You know, the only exception would be is if you're really looking for a specific card as an out and it's not already in your graveyard, because, you know, 6 allows you to discard land to play stuff out of your graveyard, right? So anything that's in your graveyard is basically like it's in your hand if you've got land to discard, which Life from the Loam gives you, right? But if you're looking for a specific card and you really need it to be in your hand, and there's very few cards in this deck where I can even think that this might be true. I'm trying to like figure out a situation where you would ever want to draw versus dredging, and I can think of very few, because the only ones would be instants. Like if I was like dying to find my heroic intervention, I don't want to mill it with Life from the Loam, right? Because I can't retrace it with 6. But what I could do is play a Skullwinder, right, to get the heroic intervention back if I dredge it. If I have a Skullwinder in my graveyard, then I still probably would try to dredge the Life from the Loam if I was looking for heroic intervention, because if I mill it, I just play Skullwinder and I get it back, right? Or you play Eternal Witness instead if you don't love Skullwinder, but I'm just kind of experimenting with Skullwinder, and I think it's a pretty fun and cool card. So, in general, once you get Life from the Loam in your graveyard, you're golden. and that sets you up really strong, like going into the mid and end game. So that's a critical card, and try to avoid getting it exiled if you can. Which can be easier said than done, but like it's not the end of the world if it happens, but it really like makes this deck go hard once you've got it. So that's what we're doing. I mean, we're setting up mana engines. We're trying to get a strong board state and really set up to win via an alpha strike or just like strong pump effect. So cards like Communal Brewing, this card is nuts. If you haven't played with or against it, highly recommend you pick up a copy. Those of you who have been around in my Discord for a while know about this card. I own like over 150 copies of it because I expect that any day this card's going to like catch fire and just blow up because it's just so good. I mean, it's 3 mana, it's an enchantment. Yes, you have to give some card advantage to your opponents, and if they remove it right away, which they absolutely should, then you kind of got screwed. However, if they don't, it's just nuts. It automatically gets a counter, and most people miss that. It says whenever, it says put an ingredient counter on Communal Brewing, comma, then put an ingredient counter on it for each card you gave to your opponents. So basically what it does is when you play it, you get to choose any number of opponents to draw a card. Usually you're going to choose everyone. So, okay, all 3 of you draw a card. This gets 1 counter automatically, and it gets 1 per opponent you had draw. So 4 counters, up to 4 counters. And that's like ignoring any proliferate shenanigans you do after the fact. This is cards insane in like original Atraxa where you can just proliferate it every turn. So good. But even without proliferate, which we're not running any proliferate, this is just like, hey, it comes in with 4 counters, and now every creature I cast comes in with 4+1 counters on it. What? This card's crazy. Crazy good. Opponents have to like shut this down immediately or they're just going to lose. Champion of Lambholt, busted card. This makes it so none of your stuff is blockable, basically. Like Champion gets huge and then none of your stuff's blockable. It's just like so OP. I don't know why more people don't play this card. It's like just nuts. Defiler of Vigor, I absolutely love this card. This is the best Defiler by far. I like all the Defilers, all of them. But this one is nuts. First of all, it's like Keurig, except it can only reduce 1 green pit. But basically, it turns all of these like 1 mana dorks can be played for free now, right? You can just say, I'm going to blank the cost of that Arbor Elf and play it for free. It costs 2 life, yes, but life's a resource. Use it. Don't worry about your life total. And if you are worried about it, you know what? You know what we're playing? Essence Warden. Just a 1 mana elf. No biggie, right? This card's going to gain you 30 life over the course of a game, maybe 50. I kid you not. And what are they going to do? Swords it? If they remove it, normally, guess what? Just play it again. If this card's on your board the whole game, you'll have infinite life. Not joking. This card is crazy. Same thing as Soul Warden, same thing as Soul's Attendant in white. Play those cards more often. They are so good. It doesn't have to be in a life gain deck. Just drop that card on turn 1, see how much life it gains you. Anyway, Defiler of Vigor, every time you cast a green permanent, put a +1 counter on your whole team. Does this get out of control quickly? Yes. This card is nuts. And then lastly, we've got some classics. We've got Craterhoof, winning games since 1990. I don't know when this card came out. You get it. Chroma's Memorial, great way to give haste and a bunch of protection abilities, including like Vigilance, which is an majorly underrated keyword in my opinion. Trample, haste, pro black, pro red, first strike, flying, pretty much everything you could want. Except for lifelink, which is sad, but probably would be too good with that. But yeah, this is a great card, especially when you can cast it from your graveyard whenever you want, just to kind of like, hey, I'm going to give my board haste and flying all of a sudden. GG. And then this little doozy. This card's phenomenal in any deck. However, it's extra good in this deck. Let's talk about why. So battles, in case you don't remember or weren't around when these came out, this is a new card type. As of March of the Machines is when they came out. And how it works is it's kind of like an enchantment. It comes down, you choose an opponent to defend it. So you typically you're going to want to choose if you choose the blue player, like, or whoever is the closest to a quote unquote blue player, that's probably a pretty good way to decide who to choose. But really, you're going to want to choose whoever is likely to have the least blockers. So the control player is who you want to choose to defend this, typically, if you're not sure, because then you can choose to attack this. It's like a planeswalker in that way. So it's like they control a planeswalker that they're able to defend. They can put blockers in front of it. And if you get through to it for 6 health, and the health can't ever regenerate, it drops down to 0 once you kill it. And then as soon as you do, it flips and you can cast it transformed. So if you are able to strike this thing for 6 damage and they don't block it, then it flips over and you get to cast. It actually goes on the stack, so it could be countered. And it tells you that on the front. It says, as it enters, you choose an opponent to protect it, and then when it's defeated, exile it, and then you can cast it transformed. So they do have the opportunity to interact with it, and they might want to, because Slortha, Apex of Ikoria, is a boosted card. It's an 8/8 with reach, and it says all of your non-humans basically are unblockable. They can block them, it just doesn't do anything. Your creatures will still take damage, so like it's not quite unblockable, right? But it basically means they can't stop any of the damage that's coming at them. So typically you're going to want to play and get this flipped when you're ready to win the game. And it does a pretty damn good job of that. So let's talk a little bit about the removal that we run. We don't have a lot of board wipes, or any, I guess, because this is a mono green deck. And I don't know if you know this, but mono green, not so good at board wipes. You could certainly add stuff like, Never Knowledge Disc or Oblivion Stone, Perilous Vault. These are the artifacts that sack to kind of blow everything up. But I find that, this deck gets by without it. And like when I play a mono green deck, I kind of want to lean into the whole thing about mono green, which is like, hey, we don't really do board wipes. We're trying to proliferate, and we're nature and spread and all of that, right? We're not about blowing up the world and kind of starting from scratch. That's more of a white thing. But we do have a lot of single target removal, including like very annoying pieces that can be very difficult for opponent to deal with. Stuff like Kenra's Transformation, which can turn a commander into a 3/3 elk with no abilities. Shout out to Oko. This card's major pain to deal with if you're an opponent, and God help them if you could just cast this from your graveyard anytime that they remove it, Same thing with Lignify. Same thing with Song of the Dryads. This can take out any permanent. So they're a pesky planeswalker that's bugging you. Someone got an Aetherflux Reservoir that's kind of getting a little scary. Song of the Dryads. Now you've got a forest. Enjoy. Very annoying cards. Especially annoying in this deck when you can just retrace them from your graveyard over and over and over. Masked Vandal. This is a card that sees criminally little play. I play it in like every green deck, so if you watch my videos or seen my decks, like you see it all the time, but I don't recall ever seeing an opponent play this card ever in my life. I could be forgetting, but like this card crazy good. For the like extremely small cost of just exiling any random creature from your graveyard, you get to exile any artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Does anyone in Commander play good artifacts or enchantments that you might want to exile? I don't know. The One Ring, Smothering Tithe, Mystic Study, Bolus's Citadel, Aetherflux Reservoir. I could go on for like 10 hours. And I will, but I won't. Sorry, I could, but I won't. Or will I? Just kidding. This card's crazy. So good. And we're running 45 creatures, so, this is just MVP of the deck. Haywire Might, also insane. Can't hit creatures, enchantments, or artifacts, unfortunately, so not quite as good as Masked Vandal, but the life gain's nice. It's only 1 mana. This is a great card. And then we've got just kind of another few pieces, like stuff like Kogla that does sort of fight, and it can hit artifacts, enchantments. We've got a little bit of a stacks piece in Manglehorn. We're not running a ton of artifacts, but this just affects opponents' artifacts. So if you're against a bunch of treasure decks or something like that, Manglehorn can be a nice piece to get out. And again, when they can't get rid of it unless they exile it, it can be very, very annoying for them. This can shut down entire decks. So keep in mind when you're figuring out, what do I need to find? What do I need to get into my graveyard, etc. Yeah, I mean, that's really the main things I wanted to talk about. We've got a few extra pieces to get stuff milled, but mainly 6 does a good job of that for us. These can be nice little like beneficial like boosts to that, but really like I think the idea is just play it as it comes. Like feel out the game, feel out what you mill. This is such a fun deck to play. Every game feels totally different. Like you're just dealing with whatever 6 dumps into your graveyard. It's almost like you're drawing 3 cards a turn, because those 3 cards you mill are either coming back to your hand in the form of land, or you can play them from your graveyard using retrace. So, this deck's a blast. Highly recommend you try it out. And thanks for watching this deck guide. I'm going to jump into some Mulligan practice. I think, this is one of the best ways you can improve your game. So definitely stick around and watch this. And I just want to mention again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support I've gotten so far. Please drop me a comment and let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you felt like I could have included something else or done something a little bit differently. I'm new at this, so I'm definitely looking for feedback. And I appreciate all the comments, feedback, and support that I've gotten so far. So please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Join my Discord. I'll link it in the description below. And yeah, enjoy the Mulligan practice and enjoy the game. And so I'm just going to hit the playtest button here. And before I give my commentary, as I've mentioned in previous deck guides, I think one of the best ways to improve is to do this sort of Mulligan practice. And if you really want to get the most out of this video, I would highly encourage you to pause the video. I'm going to give you the prompt to do so. So pause it. Think about, would you keep this hand? Like, this is our opening 7. We don't know who we're playing against, so we're going to say we're against some random opponents. We don't know who they are. We're going to assume that they're around the same power level as we are, and we won't know if we're going first, second, third, or fourth. None of that matters. Let's just make this decision in a vacuum, understanding that this is our opening 7. So pause the video, make that decision. When you're ready, unpause it. And I mean, I hope no one said that they would mulligan this hand. It looks pretty nutty, pun intended. Our little Toski friend here. Yeah, I mean, turn 1 Soul Ring hands are... I don't like to play test them that much because they're not representative of what a real game is going to be like. So I'm just going to skip past this hand and say, yeah, this hand's going to work. We're going to play a turn 1 Soul Ring, a turn 2 Commander, turn 3 Toski. This hand is explosive. And we've got some powerful finishers here that we can play whenever we want, basically. And it's pretty nice to have these in hand, honestly, because it obscures them. Because the one thing that I didn't mention yet that can be a little scary with this deck against, observant opponents is that they will know what's in your graveyard, and they'll constantly be asking you to look at your graveyard. And that's a telltale sign that you're against a competent opponent if they keep asking what's in your graveyard, versus other players who are just like, la-di-da, how many cards do you have in hand? You're like, I only have 1. Don't worry about it. Meanwhile, you've got 45 cards in your graveyard that are essentially all in your hand because you've got a life from the Loam that you've been dredging every turn, blah, 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 blah. So I'm not going to play this one out because it's this plays itself. So let's get a more difficult one. My mouse is being really laggy for some reason. Restart. All right, pause the video. Tell me, do you keep this one? Unfortunately, Temple is not a keepable in the opener. And, I do like Temple. Like, there are going to be hands like this where you're like, oh, I wish it was another land. But if you play Temple in place of a land, like, don't play it. So what I'm trying to say is, like, if you want to run 35 land, don't replace one of your 35 land with Temple. Run it as your 36th land. Run it as a spell. And in that way, you won't ever be unhappy with it. So if we pretend that the Temple is a spell that is only playable on turn 5, but says put a land into play that taps for 2 mana, that's kind of what it is, right? So are we keeping this one lander? No, we're not. We're going to 6. All right, pause it. Tell me, do you keep this one? So this is our second 7. Keep that in mind. So if we were to mulligan again, it would mean that we're going to 6. I think this hand's keepable. I don't think it's great. It's pretty good. We've got a turn 1 play, which is nice. We can't play Lotus Field on turn 2. We can only play that on turn 3 and beyond. But we've got other land to play, so Lotus Field is fine to be in hand. We could also just discard it to 6 and use it later. I think this hand is better than going down. It's actually pretty good. I didn't even think about the fact that we've got the Lightning Greaves. So this is almost like the same as playing 6 on turn 2. It's maybe even a little bit better because we keep 6 safe until we play him, and then opponents get that one chance to remove it, or you drop the boots on him, and then it's kind of like, well, it's a board wipe or nothing at that point, right? So this hand looks good. Let's just play it out and see how it goes. So we're going to draw. We draw Party Tree. One thing to keep in mind is we don't have a lot of colored mana. I mean, we've got the Boseiju, but we'd rather not play that. Although if we do, it's not the end of the world. We have some ways to sack land, and then we can get them back later. So that's something to keep in mind with this deck. You can always sack the land you've got in play, and then replay them from the graveyard, or even get them all back at once with something like Lumra or Aftermath Analyst. But we're going to start off with the Prismatic Vista. We're going to fetch. Whoops. We'll grab a forest. You don't even need to do this. You can just tap it. We're just playtesting, right? So let's drop the Essence Warden. Let's go to our next turn. Right, we can play Nykthos here. Drop the Lightning Greaves next turn. All right, let's play this land. We're going to avoid playing the Boseiju if we can help it, but we will play it if we need to. It's not, don't get too hyper focused on ensuring that you hang on to this. If you need to play it as a land, just play it as a land. It's not the end of the world. So what are we doing here? Well, we're upping 6 and we're putting the boots on him, and let's assume he survives. We're going to mill Beast Whisperer, Verdant Catacombs, Elvish Reclaimer. So we get that land, and then we've got a Beast Whisperer, which we probably want to get developed ASAP, and we've got Elvish Reclaimer. So speaking of which, ways to sack lands, we've got one right here. So playing Boseiju just became a lot safer and better play for us. Okay, so can we do anything else this turn? Well, we've already played a land, so not really, right? So let's just go to our next turn. So now all of a sudden we've got tons of options, right? This is the first turn where we've had 6 in play and we've had mana open. So we have a ton of options. So, pause the video if you need to and think what do you do here? We've got a lot of different plays, right? We can drop land. We could play a Tortoise, which is nice to develop early. We can retrace our Beast Whisperer or our Elvish Reclaimer. We can play Spinner of Souls, which is nice to get online early. This is a new card that's kind of like a value engine. If they don't deal with it, then all of our creatures basically draw a card when they die. So what would you do here? I think the correct answer, and what you're typically going to want to default to in this deck, not always, but typically, is go to combat first. This is true from a lot of decks, like most decks. As a general rule, if you say I'm going to play all my spells in my second main phase, unless there's a reason not to, you want to pump or whatever, play something that has an anthem effect, play something that gives haste, whatever. In this case, we have the Greaves, so, you know, it is possible that we just want to drop the Tortoise first, Greaves it up, and then attack. In fact, the more I think about it, that's probably the right play. So if that's what you said, I think you're right and I'm wrong. But I'd say in general, with this deck, if you don't have Lightning Greaves, because most games you won't, then you're going to want to attack first, because putting those cards into your graveyard is going to give you more options to decide what is the best play. But in this case, we've got a really strong play here, which is drop the Catacombs, crack it, get a forest. It's really nice to crack the Catacombs. Did I put it on top? I think I did. Let's put that in our graveyard. So with the Tortoise, it's extra nice to have the Catacombs crack it first, because now we're guaranteed, well, we already have the Vista too. I didn't think about it, but we're going to have 2 triggers of the Tortoise, right? We're going to play the Tortoise. When it ETBs, we get the first trigger, right? We mill 3. Weathertop, Harbor Elf, Wildgrowth, and then we could return any land we want from the graveyard to the battlefield. So, you know, I think we take Weathertop here because we've got Nykthos, so this is a very powerful combo, but it enters tap, so we can't use it this turn anyway. And by the way, Tortoise Nykthos combo, because it does reduce this cost by 1, something that I forget pretty much every game, I think. But I always seem to remember when I'm playtesting. It's just how it works, right? So anyway, we put the boots on the turtle, we go to combat, we send with the turtle, it gets another trigger, we mill Castle Garenberg, Forest, Clownor Elves. The 6 went first, so I guess what we would have done is wanted to do is trigger the 6 first. So we'll get this forest back, and then the Tortoise. That way the Tortoise has the most options of what to return. Manglehorn, Tower Winder, Void Jinxator. I want to talk quickly about Tower Winder before I move on to the next mulligan, but let me just finish this sequence. So we could return one of these 2 land now. Doesn't really matter, these do the exact same thing in this deck. So we'll bring in this Verdant Catacombs tapped. So now it's turn 4. We have 6 land in play already. We've got the Tortoise developed. This is a overwhelmingly strong position here. So I think we've got a stocked graveyard. We could just get the Beast Whisperer developed now. We have double Nykthos activations on every turn with Weathertop plus Nykthos. This is a crazy good start, but this is not abnormal. This is the kind of plays that you can make with this deck. It's just so strong, so good. Real quick before I move on, Tower Winder. Why am I playing Tower Winder in a mono green deck, you might ask? And it's quite a valid question. Actually wasn't running it for a while, and then I had this revelatory moment where I was like, oh my god, Tower Winder is so good in this deck. Why? Well, it searches Command Tower, right? What is Command Tower? It's just a glorified forest in a mono green deck, right? So that's not the reason. It's not like Command Tower does anything special. We're not cheating to make some other colors or something. But the downside of Tower Winder, if you ever played Hearthstone and you know, it's like when you draw Patches, right? Patches is a 1 mana pirate dog that when you play your first pirate, it pulls Patches, this legendary creature, out of your deck and puts it directly into play. But if you drew Patches in your opening hand, it's shit. Now I can't get it anymore, right? So Tower Winder is kind of like that in a way, right? So if you play this in any other deck where it actually is useful to get a Command Tower, then you'll find those games where you draw it right before you play the Tower Winder, and it's oh, so frustrating. I was about to search up that Command Tower, but now I drew it. So now when I play the Tower Winder, I no longer get to draw a card. But in this deck, that downside is mitigated tremendously, because if you draw the Command Tower, you can discard it to 6's retrace ability, and careful readers will note that Tower Winder says search your library and or graveyard for a card named Command Tower. So if you're able to discard your Command Tower to have some sort of advantage, like retrace, for example, then Tower Winder is never a dead draw, because you could always just discard the Command Tower, draw it again with Tower Winder, sack the Command Tower to the Elvish Reclaimer for some sort of value, get it back with Tower Winder. And Having a 1/1 Death Touch Reach in this deck is really strong too, because we always want to be turning our creatures sideways. So having this 1/1 like poison trap kind of wards off attackers, very strong, very potent in a deck like this. Let's move to the next hand. Pause it. Tell me, do you keep this hand? This is our opening 7. So if you said yes, because Life from the Loam is a very powerful card in this deck, that's a good thought, but I would not keep this hand. It does nothing on turn 1 or turn 2. Life from the Loam does nothing. We could cast it just to get into a graveyard, which we would do if we had no other play on turn 2, even returning 0 land. But this is not a keepable hand, especially on our opening 7. We really, really want a 1-mana dork. That is like what we want. If we had a 1-mana dork, like instead of any of these cards, like this hand might be keepable. Except for the Life from the Loam. If there was a 1-mana dork instead of the Life from the Loam, I would still keep this hand. But as is, let's try another 7. We can do better. All right, pause it. Tell me, do you keep this one? This is our second 7 now. This is really sketchy, but I would keep it probably. I think it's good enough. Spelunking is really good in this deck, especially on turn 3. Analyst is just a bonkers card. Growing Rights is really good. We have a strong turn 2 play in Malevolent Rumble, which draws us a card basically and fills our graveyard. So I think this is playable. If this was my opening 7, I would probably toss it back and try to find a 1-mana dork, because that, having a hand with a 1-mana dork is really what you want. I know I keep saying that over and over, but I would keep a 3-card hand that was 2 forests and a line of werewolves. That is how important it is, because once 6 is in play, like that is what you want. It starts turning your graveyard into your hand, and that's how the deck works. So, that being said, this is better than 6, I think, but it's really close. If you chose to go to 6 on this hand, I wouldn't blame you. All right, draw. We could fetch right away to thin our deck, but I don't really think we want to not draw land here, so I think we're going to play the fetch land as late as possible. Plus, if we draw Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, then we never have to back the fetch lands, because we could tap our fetch lands for mana. And if we draw other land and can discard this instead, that's good too. We've got the Aftermath Analyst too, we have to keep that in mind, so getting the fetch land into the graveyard is more important. Okay, so we have no turn 1 play, so we'll pass, and now we draw the Mana Dork. Sad. So what do we do here? Do we play Malevolent Rumble, or do we play the work? I think in general you want to err on the side of using all of your mana. However, developing a mana is also powerful, because if, let's say, we mill another 1-mana dork with 6, when we attack, oh no, we won't be attacking next turn, so it would really only benefit us if we drew another 1-mana play next turn. So pretty close here. I don't know what the right play is. I think I'd probably just develop the dork, because it's not really any better mana advantage to play this, because this is giving us an additional mana. So like, even though we're spending more mana this turn, we're going to have more mana next turn, right? Now, are we going to be able to use that additional mana next turn? Maybe not. But really having this like on board every single turn, we can't play this next turn either if we play Malevolent Rumble this turn, right? So it's a close call here. I think playing the dork's the right play, long story short. So let's just do that. Go to our next turn. Sad we didn't draw another 1-mana play, but that's okay. Now we can leave our mana dork back to block if we need to. I'm just going to tap this fetch, whatever. We're just playtesting, not a big deal. All right, can't do anything else. Pass. Now we draw another 1-mana play, of course. So it goes. Okay, so what do we do here? I'm going to ask you to pause the video or think about this and tell me, what do you do here? So if you said, let's attack first, see what we get, you get a gold star. So let's attack. Mill, forest, mulch, prismatic vista. Take the forest back. Okay, so we didn't hit anything useful, right? We have nothing in our graveyard to retrace, so pretty easy decision here. Or is it? I don't know. I think I'm leaning toward, well, we're going to play land, of course, right? I think we're going to play the Utopia Sprawl because it's free. I think we'll name green. Although if you had any sort of weird reason to name another color, I guess you could. But typically in this deck, we're going to name green. And then, so I think what we want to do is first play Malevolent Rumble because we can get a land back with this and then drop that land with Spelunking. Actually, no, we've already played a land, right? Oh, yeah, we have the Dork. So, yeah, I think we cast Malevolent Rumble first. So, we're going to reveal the top 4. We can take a permanent. So, maybe we should have waited on playing a land. I didn't really think about it, but like we would have had more options had we done that. So, here's what we revealed. We're going to pick any of these because they're all permanents to go to our hand. We're also going to get a 1/1 spawn. That's like a lotus petal, kind of like a treasure token, so to speak. So we have access to, does this come in lands you control, enter untapped? Okay, so like, yeah, duh. So Spelunking puts a land in untapped, even if it's a land that would come in tapped, which none of these are. But, you know, we've got 3 mana, right? Potentially 4 if we want to use the spawn. So if we take Ancient Tomb, then we could play Spelunking for 3. We could put in Ancient Tomb, but then we're only going to have access to 2 colors from Ancient Tomb plus 1 from Eldrazi Spawn, so 3 colorless in total. Or we could sack the spawn now. So, like, what if we did sack spawn, tap these 2? This is a green source, right? We play Spelunking. We draw a card. And then let's say we're pretending we took the Ancient Tomb here. So the Ancient Tomb's in our hand. We drop that into play with the Spelunking's effect. And now we've got access to 3 mana, right? We happen to draw a card that could have used the 3 colorless mana that we would have had, but that's okay. Like, we've got other really good plays here, right? We can play Growing Rights, although I don't love playing Growing Rights when it's not going to flip right away because it gives opponents an option or a chance to get rid of it. So I think I might just... So we've got a bunch of land in our graveyard now, right? Because the rest of these go to the graveyard. So, I mean, 1, 2, 3 land in the graveyard. Like, honestly, just like slamming the Aftermath Analyst, threatening to sack it next turn. We could drop Aftermath Analyst plus Shadow Spear. This is turn 4. Like, look how strong the start is. This deck is just so good. It's so fun. I mean, look at this. How could you not just like smile? I love playing this deck. It's so fun. Let's do one more. All right, pause it. Do you keep this hand? I love having Spelunking my opener. I might keep it if I was like wanting to not have such an explosive start, which is not what you should do, but it's something to consider. Like sometimes you don't want to just like explode out and get your commander out on turn 2. But I'd say like if you're trying to optimize, let's toss this and get a new hand. Sad though, I love having Spelunking out. It like makes the game so smooth. All right, here's our second 7. Pause it. You keep this hand. Hell yeah, this is like the best hand I've ever seen. Yeah, this hand's nuts. Yes, please. All right. Turn 1, Endurance. Send a message. Just kidding. Play Llanowar Elves. Next turn. So now, like, we've got options. Like, what do we do here? What do you do? Pause it. Tell me what you do here. If you said slam Communal Brewing on turn 2, that's probably what I would do. Is that the right play to make you have the highest chance of winning the game? That is debatable. It's going to set you up in a power position, but do you really want to be the archenemy on turn 2? I don't have the answer for you because I just default to making that sort of play, and then I lose the game a lot of times because of it, and then I whine about it. But if you'd prefer not to go that route, I would understand. That being said, if you just play the Woodland Slam Communal Brewing, it's pretty good because then you go to your next turn, you play a 6, it'll enter with 4+1 counters and be a 6/8 on turn 3. Seems good. Yeah. Sylvan Library also incredibly good in this deck because you can leave land on top, leave the stuff you want to mill on top. Really powerful to know the top of your deck. In fact, if you wanted to throw like a Sensei's Divining Top in this deck, really good deck for it. I don't like to run that card in a lot of my decks because it just slows the game down and people tend to have an adverse reaction to it, but it's very good in this deck. And it, same thing with something like Miri's Guile, which is a 1-mana green enchantment that sort of does the same thing. These are all very good cards in this deck. So you could see this hand's going to be explosive and just work really well. We're going to land Beast Whisperer next. It's going to be a 6/8, no, 6/7 Communal Brewing. This card's just crazy. So, the only downside is like it does create a huge target because people are going to see your creature, you're going to play a Llanowar Elf that's a 5/5 and all of a sudden everyone's eyes are on you. Even if they weren't paying attention before, they're going to be like, why is your Llanowar Elf a 5/5? And it sort of can spiral out of control from there. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to post a gameplay video immediately following this, so check that out. And I hope you enjoy. Matt from surfcitytcg signing off for now. Peace.
That is going to be your turn. No, you're good, man. Take your time. Are you going to play Fblthp?
Yeah, I think so.
Are you playing 6 as your commander?
Yes, sir.
What kind of 6 deck is it?
It's just a value deck. It's like a power 7, not really any combos, just playing for value.
So like, and it's no right or wrongs here, but like when we talk about my deck is a 7, that's what we call like a tier 2 deck or like a mid-power deck. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong 7, but I'm not playing any infinites and no fast mana, no combos. So, but it's a very consistent and synergistic
combos,
deck.
no infinite combos, no combos at all, or no infinite combos.
Well, I mean, like, it depends what you mean by combo. Combo is kind of a loosely defined term. So,
I agree wholeheartedly.
I've got some strong cards in here. Like I'm playing the Great Henge, and that's probably my strongest card.
So tier 2 is fine. My deck is a 7, is fine. Like I got no issues with it.
Have those tiers been defined at this point?
They have not. They have not.
Okay.
But we have worked very hard within our group to basically say, okay, low power is tier 1, and this is what we think it looks like. Mid power is tier 2, and this is what we think it looks like. High power is tier 3, and this is what we think it looks like. And then tier 4 is that maximum power, that no holds barred, that I'm here for names and I'm gonna kick ass kind of game, Obviously that's going to include bullshit like Armageddon, so
yeah, this is like a high 2, maybe low 3.
Lou, I'm going to play Narci, which is a saga deck. I was thinking about playing Sophia, but I don't think Sophia is the right deck for a like tier 2 game, which is no worries. I've got a handful of decks, so I'm going to play Narci. Lou, I don't know what you want to play. The reason I'm talking to you specifically is because we were talking earlier. I don't know. If you want to play Flower, I think Bumbleflower is probably fine.
Okay.
I mean, it's up to you, man. I have made some pretty significant changes to Narci from the last time we played, so I do apologize about last game.
Is that the
Ooh, you
one
have a
with
night.
the three blind mice? Was it the
Yeah.
same deck?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the 3 blind mice deck. Yep.
You have a signed Narci. That's sweet. I have one just like that.
A signed one?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Where'd you get yours signed?
MagicCon Las Vegas last in 2023. I saw her
Okay.
in 24 also, but I already had it.
I was disappointed that I didn't get to send some other cards
Check it
out
out.
to her. Yeah, her signature is
It's so beautiful.
Yeah,
You know.
beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. I cut Savine's reclamation, Lou, so you won't see that tonight. Oh, you are playing Rule 42. I think you should just change the deck to that name. Or whatever the rule number is.
Rule 34.
Yeah.
Let's see if we're gonna be good here.
No, that's a no lander. I'll take my free mulligan.
I'm really not super worried about it, brother. We'd rather have a fun, enjoyable game where everybody gets to contribute than be super worried about what's happening mulligan-wise.
That's
Not
fair.
saying that we encourage people abusing it. I'm gonna also mulligan as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's cool, but I like to follow rules
I
for
get
my
you.
own.
I got you, brother. I'm just letting you know that if you get a really shitty second 7, don't feel like you have to stick down to a 6, you know? Like we usually just go from the idea of like if you built a deck that has an appropriate amount of like ramp and mana and you get like a couple of bad hands in a row, it's fine. But like if you're always just because like you didn't put enough land in there, if you're always like mulliganing, it's like, nah, I don't think so, you know, like just, you know, add a couple
Sure.
of lands or whatever it is. But yeah, I had 2 lander there with absolutely nothing to do with 2 lands, and I'm just like, yeah, we can't do that.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll keep.
I am gonna go down to 6 though because I cannot keep a 1 lander.
I mean, I also don't mind if you want to go to 7 again. I don't care.
I
Whatever you
punish
would
my
do
decks.
normally. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
do the same
punish
thing.
my decks. Like it's their fault. They shouldn't be bad.
I agree. Who's your commander, Crest?
Fblthp, I gotta put it in there.
Okay.
I guess I should have just realized though that Lou's playing Bumbleflower and I was gonna get enough draws that it would probably be okay. Should have just kept the first hand. Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Go down to 6.
Hey, look at that, a 4 lander. I love every bit of that.
Put this on the bottom.
Yeah, I can work with that. I'm gonna put this card back.
Cool. Everyone ready?
Yeah, good to go.
All right. I'll start us off. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah.
Sure. Play a forest and tap 1 for a Llanowar Elves. I'll pass.
I'll draw. I will play a land into the battlefield tapped. I'm going to play this. I guess that technically. I'm just going to play a Overgrown Tomb into play tapped. And I'll pass.
Play an island. Tap that into a ponder. I'm going to shuffle. Then draw. But I'll let you go.
Alright. Draw. I'm going to play out a Thriving Isle tapped and name green as the other color and pass.
All right. Untap, upkeep, draw. It's like Castle Garenbrag as land for turn. And I'll tap 3 for the boy. Yes.
Sounds good. It's going to be a slow game for me over here, but that's all right. I'm going to play a Hushwood Verge and tap for 2, and I'm going to play a Shigeki Jukai Visionary, and I'll pass.
And tap 1 for a Traveler's Amulet and pass.
Alright. Untap, upkeep, draw. I'll put out a Seachrome Coast to enters tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands.
You're untapped, baby boy. You're untapped.
I'm untapped. Okay.
You're untapped, yeah. Even though it's a bad card, I wouldn't play that in the future, but yeah, it's untapped. It's not as good as the slow lands. So those are called fast lands. If you control 2 or fewer other lands, so when it enters, it looks to see how many including me. Is how many including me more than 3? If the answer is yes, then it enters tapped. But if it makes the third, then it's untapped. Whereas the other lands have to be the third land to be untapped, and they will be untapped if there are more than 3, whereas these will not be untapped if there are more than 3.
Over to 6.
You passed? Okay.
Yeah.
Untap, upkeep, draw. So we'll just go to combat first. I'll send 2 damage with my commander over at Fblthp, and I'll mill 3 on attack. Soul Ring, Forest, Verdant Catacombs. I'll put the Forest into my hand. And second main, we'll tap 1, discard the Forest, cast Soul Ring from my graveyard using Retrace.
Yep.
I'll play this Yavimaya Cradle of Growth as land for turn, so everyone's lands are forests in addition to their other types.
Yep.
Pay 4, cast a Beast Whisper.
Okay.
And then I'll pay 1 for a Bop. And I'll draw a card on cast. Or, yeah, it is on cast. Okay. Alright, that's it. S.
He says that's it.
That's it.
He hasn't done enough.
It's just some green creatures. Don't worry about it.
No, I'm not worried about it. Did I say I was worried? I'm going to tap a swamp. I'm going to tap a swamp for a green, and I'm going to enchant my Hushwood. No, I'm not, because if something happens to it, I'm going to actually just enchant the forest. I will use this to tap for a green, but I'm just going to be lame and put a Utopia Sprawl on a Tumba Infesti. I can't say the last one, but anyway. We got 3 mana here.
What color are you naming?
White. I apologize. White is what I'm naming there. I'm going to play a Hunger Tide Rises. I'm going to make a 1/1 black and green insect token creature. Do I know where an insect is? Not really. No. I thought I did, but that doesn't have them. So.
Did you check under a rock?
I mean, I have insects. I'm sure of it. I just have been trying to figure out how to get my. I've been trying to overhaul my commander storage recently. And,
oh my god, I went through a project to do that over the last 18 months. It took forever.
I've just come to the conclusion. I've just come to the conclusion that I need to get rid of my deck boxes that don't allow me
Yep.
to put the whole deck in there, and I just need to get deck boxes big enough to store the tokens. And the token storage system that I have right now is just not working. It's just miserable. So
Yep.
I was trying to avoid doing miserable things, but there is a that's an insect, which I think
He's
is
got an insect.
yeah. But as you can see through my fucking 2 piles of tokens here, that I don't have a very efficient way to store tokens or do this. So now that I have an insect, I have a Saga on 1. I have a Utopia Sprawl that makes a white mana, and I will commit violence against Lou for 1 damage. Yeah, that's right. Bumbleflower. Gotta let him know.
Island.
This aggression
Let's
will not
send in a
stand.
message.
I'm gonna tap 2 for Fblthp.
Yikes.
Draw. I'll tap this, sack the Traveler's Amulet, and pass. Search for an island.
I have not played
Alright.
against Fblthp before. Is there something I need to know? Or
It's a weird he takes advantage of the gimmick that whenever Fblthp gets targeted, that it goes into his library, and then he has ways to manipulate the cards of his library in between the top of his library and the creature in his library, and he only has 1 creature. So he
Got
can
it.
get to a spot where he can like put his commander in the library and then manipulate the top of the library. But it's very much a work in progress, and
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then I'm going to
Sounds
tap
fun.
4. And I'm going to tempt y'all with Discovery.
yo, I don't have any
Ooh.
mana. You should have done that when I had some mana, brother.
I'm sorry, I did it as fast as I could.
I mean, it's just that, you know, I'm tempted, but I can't pay for it.
Why do you got to pay for it?
You don't have to
Don't I
pay.
have to pay
It's-
mana?
No, you get to say yes or no. You get to search for any land you want. If you do, he gets an
Well,
extra one.
Matt, you've got priority. What choice are you making?
What are you guys going to do? We should say no. However, I'm not going to say no if you guys aren't going to say no.
I mean, I have no reason to say yes, if I'm being honest.
I don't really either at this point.
All right, I'll decline.
Okay. I'll go
I'll
get
say
my
no.
land and tell y'all to fuck
No.
on. I'll just get planes.
Oh, you guys are so responsible. Normally, the people I play with are like, "Fuck it," and then we lose.
Well, you got to understand that our play group is bigger than just like 3 or 4 people. So, as you can imagine, when you start to get to like a group of like 10 people, you're gonna have
What land?
people that are like that, you know.
Oh, I
And
just
Yeah.
put up planes out.
Oh,
yeah,
you just got a
got
plains? You can get any land. Doesn't have to be just a basic.
Yeah,
That's-
that's all right.
Okay.
I don't have anything fancy in here.
It also comes in untapped.
Yeah.
Tap, upkeep, draw. All right, let's go to combat. I'll send 6 over your way, Lucas. So 2/4. On attack, I'll mill Mask Vandal, Forest, Forest. I'll put a forest into my hand.
Sounds good.
All right, you took it. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to play a Maze of Ith as land for turn. And I probably should have done this first, but whatever. Maybe 6. Sure, I'll tap Castle Garenbrig for 6 green that can only be used for creatures. I'm going to use 3 of it to cast a Augur of Autumn. I'll draw a card on cast from Beast Whisperer. And then I can look at the top. I can play lands off the top and creatures if I have Coven. I do have Coven because this is 0, 1, 2. That is not a creature or a land. I tap for 1 green, and I'll play an Essence Warden. So whenever a creature enters, I gain a life. I'll draw a card. And then I'll use my 3 green floating here to play... Do you have any cards in graveyard, Joseph?
No, sir.
Okay. Guess I'm going to play a Skullwinder with my 3 floating. So when it enters, I return a card, and then I choose a player to return a card also. I'll choose you, Joseph, since you don't have anything. And I'll... Yeah, you can respond if you want.
No, I'm good.
Okay. I'll gain 1 from Essence Warden. I'll draw a card from Beast Whisperer. And I will return this Masked Vandal to my hand. And I think that was plenty. Oh, I could play that. Okay, I'll tap Birds to play Ulvenwald Tracker off the top of my library. Gain a life, draw a card. Cool. I'll pass.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll go ahead and play a Deathcap Glade. And then
Don't
I'll
forget your
tap
Saga.
for a... Yep, you're right. I get another insect. Woo! I don't have a feeling that insect is, or that Saga is going to be around next turn, though, with the Masked Vandal going back to your hand. Believe it or not, I'm a little pessimistic. I'm going to go green, white, black, green. Doesn't really matter, but nonetheless, I'm going to cast a Narci. And I will pass the turn.
Play an island. Go to tap 1 for Bloodforged Battle Axe. And I'll tap 2 to equip it to Fblthp.
Nice.
I'll pass.
Untap, upkeep, draw. Let's see. This time I'm going to put out a Sungrass Prairie for my land for turn. I'm going to tap it and Soul Ring for 3 for a Good Fortune Unicorn. When another creature you control enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on it. Then I'll tap 4 for Bumbleflower and put a 1/1 counter on it. And I'll pass.
Untap. Upkeep, draw. Play a Forest as land for turn. Guess we'll go to combat. Fblthp is a 2/3 or a 3/1?
Yeah, 3/1.
Okay. I'll come at you with 6. It's a 2/4. I'll mill 3 on attack. Wild Growth, Chroma's Memorial, Kenrith's Transformation.
I'll take it. 2. So it's a 2/4?
Yeah, 2 damage.
Gotcha.
All right, I'm going to pay 1 for an exploration. So I can play an extra land every turn. I will play this forest. I guess.
Boys, I hate to break it to you, but I think 6 is the problem.
Yeah.
Whatever do you mean? It's just a friendly tree folk.
That was an Chroma's Memorial that hit the graveyard this turn?
It's in the graveyard.
Yeah.
It's the
you
worst
can't
that
just,
could happen.
discard a card and cast it from the graveyard, right? That's not a thing. Oh, wait.
You're the only one playing black.
What is that supposed to mean?
Let's gives pro black and red. Okay, I'm gonna pay 3, discarding this Dryad Arbor, and I'll cast the Kenris Transformation from my graveyard, targeting Narci.
All right. It's a 3/3.
I'll draw a card. Ooh. So I have 1 floating from Soul Ring. I'll tap 2 more, and I'll cast a Communal Brewing.
Nice.
So I'm going to choose to have everyone draw a card, all 3 of you. So this enters with 1 counter by default, but since I had each of you draw 1, it gets 3 more. So it will have 4 counters. And creatures I cast enter with that many additional +1 counters. Tap 1, 2, 3. I'll cast this Spinner of Souls. New card. Says it's a 4/3 with reach. Whenever a non-token I control dies, another non-token I can reveal off the top until I hit a creature, and that goes to my hand. And it'll enter with 4 +1 counters because of Communal Brewing. I'll gain a life, and I'll draw a card. Cool. I'm done.
Draw. Nice. 3. Get another insect. No way. I'm going to tap for a Soul Ring. Tap the Soul Ring for a Talisman. Tap the Talisman. Ouch. For a Wild Growth on the same land that has the Utopia Sprawl. I'll play my land for the turn. And then I'll tap for a black, a white, and a green. And I will use the black and the green to activate Shigeki and return Shigeki to my hand. And I'll reveal the top 4 cards of my library, and I'll put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest into the graveyard. So I'm going to put a command tower onto the battlefield tapped, and then I'm going to put the rest in the graveyard. We have a Sithis, a Shadowy Backstreet, and a Enduring Tenacity. But none of those are particularly helpful today. We'll use the white floating. We'll tap for another white. We'll play out a Barbara Wright. Then we will use our last 2 mana to pay for a Shigeki Jukai Visionary. We will pass the turn.
Alright, I'm gonna untap here. Return. I'm gonna play tap 3 for Narset, Carter of Veils.
Ew.
Yeah. I am going to drop her down to 3. I am going to take Tefari's Tutelage. Oops, I'll put these in a random order. And I'll pass.
All right. I'm going to play out a forest for my land for turn. I'm going to tap 2 for a Triskaidekaphile. No max hand size. If I have 13 cards in my hand at the beginning of my upkeep, I win the game. And I can pay 4 to draw a card. She's a 1/3. But on a cast, I'm going to give a card to Crust.
Thank you.
And I'll put a 1/1 counter on Good Fortune Unicorn. And Triskaidekaphile enters the battlefield with a 1/1 from Good Fortune Unicorn. Then second spell, I'm going to tap blue, green, white, and a colorless. Yeah. For a planeswalker called Tameo Field Researcher.
Tomato.
Yeah. He starts with 4 loyalty counters. And I'm going to +1 her. It says choose up to 2 target creatures until the end of my next turn. If they deal combat damage, I'll draw a card.
You have to do Bumbleflower trigger first.
Yeah, you're right. I'll back up a second. I was just reading it out for you.
Okay.
Bumbleflower card to Crust again. We'll say
It's pretty
another.
lame.
We'll say a counter on.
Wait, I can't.
No, you can.
No,
You
I
can.
can't.
It's only
says
you.
Opponents.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
He
says
doesn't.
opponents.
Lucas won't draw any though.
Yeah.
I won't draw any.
No,
because
I
he
have
has.
because you can
Narset
only draw
He
on,
has
one a turn.
Narset.
but you can totally kill Narset.
You
So I
should have
can't
done
draw
that
my
before. You would
No,
have
you
to
can't
kill
draw
it
more
first,
than one.
unless he lets you back up and
And
try
you're
to kill it
rewarding his
first.
behavior by giving him cards. Like, I'm not trying to be that guy, but
Yeah.
yikes.
I just meant for.
I'm just fucking with you.
I mean, we could back up if you want to take out Narset. I'm not blocking it.
It doesn't matter. I don't have a way to take out Narset either way.
Yeah, you do. You have a bunch of
3 damage.
giant flying creatures.
Oh, Narset Planeswalker. Okay.
Yeah, Narset the Planeswalker. Yeah, you got it.
Well, I would have only had 2, 4 damage on board. But let's just keep going. I don't want to fuck it up.
Okay.
Either way, I'll just uptick her in case these two deal combat damage. Until the end of my next turn, they draw a card. And then I'll pass.
Wait, you're not going to attack Narset now?
Yes. Sorry.
Your commander has vigilance.
Yeah, you're right.
You should be smashing with it.
I'll send 3 towards Narset.
All right. Narset will die.
There you go. Good man. All right.
I don't know. I liked the idea of leaving Narset on the battlefield so as to not let Surf City draw additional cards.
I'm just going to kill it myself.
Well, right, but then that forces you to kill it, right? I mean,
That's
you've got
true.
Beast Whisperer on the battlefield. Like, I'm not drawing extra cards. So
That's
from my
valid, but
perspective,
he should
like,
be in the mentality of attacking with Bumbleflower, though. That's what you have to do with that deck. Like, it's basically a Voltron deck. You should have a reason for not attacking.
It's not a Voltron deck.
Well,
it's not how I play the game.
Okay. Fair enough. So do you want to take back the attack?
No, it's fine.
Okay. End step. End step. We only have 1 mana. Okay, never mind. And tap. Upkeep, draw. Guess I'll cast. Let's activate Castle Garenbrig for 6 green. That can only be used for creatures. And I'll use 4 of it to cast a Surak the Hunt Caller. So the beginning of my combat creature, if I have 8 power or greater, then I get to give a creature haste till end of turn. It'll enter with 4+1 counters from Communal Brewing. I'll gain a life, and I'll draw a card. Oh, baby. 2 floating. 5, 6, 7. Dang, well, 1 short. It's fine. I'll use my... Yeah, I was counting those. I'll use my 2 floating to play Masked Vandal. And what are my options? We've got the Saga, we've got the Axe, Soul Ring. I'll just hit... I've already fucked with your commander, Joe, so I'll just hit the Axe. Oh, actually, hold on. I don't even have a... Oh, I have Dryad Arbor. I'll exile Dryad Arbor. So yeah, that'll get exiled. I'll gain a life. This will enter with 4+1 counters, and I'll draw a card. Cool. I will go to combat. 6 will go at Ucrust, and I'll give Surak haste with his own ability, and I'll send him at you, Lucas, and I'll send this spider at you, Joseph.
How big is the spider?
Spider is a 8/7.
I'll take 8.
Surak is a 9/8. No trample.
I'll just
And
block it with
6 is a 2/4. Okay. I'll mill 3 from 6. It's Walk-in Closet, Tower Winder, Lotus Field. I'll put the Lotus Field into my hand. It's second main. I'll play the Lotus Field. It enters tapped, and I have to sack 2 lands. So I'll sack these 2 forests.
Do they have to be untapped forest, or can they be any forest?
Any 2 land.
Nice.
The other one, Lotus Bloom, I think, has to be untapped lands, but it enters untapped. I'm going to pay 1 green. I'll cast this Sylvan Safekeeper off the top. Sack a land to give a creature Shroud. It comes with 4 counters. I gain a life. I draw a card. I can only play 1 land a turn, right? Did that. Yeah, I'll stop there. I'll pass.
Untap. Upkeep. Draw. Yay. This goes to 4. I'll sacrifice 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5. I'll search my library for 5 CMC. And I'll send the Narci back to the command zone. Any effects before I tutor? It is going to go onto the battlefield.
What creatures did you sack?
The 3 insects plus my elk and my Jukai Visionary.
Okay.
So 5 creatures.
Nice.
Any effects?
No, I got nothing.
I'm going to put an Academy Rector onto the battlefield.
Nice.
But unfortunately, that is going to be the extent of that part of my turn. And this will go to the graveyard. I will not draw a card. I will not have anybody lose life, which is a very sad day. I will then pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and cast out my commander. And then I will pay 1, 2, 3, 4, and I will cast the last card in my hand, Ashiok's Reaper, rather. Jazz hands. I'll pass the turn.
Island. I'm going to put tap 3 for Jeffrey's tutelage. It's the battlefield. I draw a card, discard a card, and anytime I draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards.
I would just advocate highly for it not to be Matt.
Yeah, I know. We'll do
Lucas
you,
Lucas is probably the one least likely to be able to use it.
Yeah. We'll do you, Joe, this turn.
2?
Yep, just 2.
Oh, dude, planes. Yikers.
All right.
That was good for you.
I guess it's just your definition of good.
You wanted to draw land when you're hellbent?
I mean, I'd like to be drawing cards while hellbent,
Yeah.
but I don't necessarily hate lands. You're not doing anything after that?
I have to discard down to hand size.
Okay.
I'm passing. We need to Brothers plate.
All right.
And Whisper Silk Cloak.
All right. Untap, upkeep, draw. I'll play out a Temple of Enlightenment and scry 1.
Get it.
That can go to the bottom. All right. Let's see here. I'll start by upticking Tameo. I'll target these two creatures. If they deal combat damage until my next turn, I draw a card. I'm going to tap 3 for an Abzan Falconer. On cast, Joe, draw a card.
I can draw one card. Yeah, let's go. That's a good card. Too bad I don't have 10 of them.
So you can only draw one card?
No. I can draw more than one card, but I'm saying that is my one card in hand. And I'm saying that card is good. I wish my hand was 10 of these cards.
Oh, okay. I get you. 2 for a... I should have put a counter on Bumbleflower. And then 2 for a Gnarly Colony.
Falconer gets a counter too from the unicorn.
Oh, yeah.
And so does the other one.
So does he. On cast, Joe, draw a card.
Nice.
And I'll draw 2.
A land.
I think I'll tap 3 for one more spell for a Scrawling Crawler. It says at the beginning of my upkeep, each player draws a card, and whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 1 life. Surf City, draw a card.
Get him.
Shower him.
That's wild. That's wild. So that card that I drew, that second card that I drew is wild. Like absolutely fantastically wild. But I don't know that I'm going to get to see another turn. So that's okay. That's what happens sometimes.
I'll just pass it there.
Okay. On your end step, I'm going to pay 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to cast this Endurance from my hand. It has flash.
Oh, sorry, I forgot you were.
When it enters, I can have a player shuffle their graveyard into their library. I'll choose, I don't know, Ucrest. And it will enter with 4+1 counters. And I will draw a card. Oh boy. And I gain a life from Essence Warden. Oh, and then I lose a life from Scrawling Crawler. So I guess, yeah, that just nets out. Okay. Yeah, I think I might have the game here. Sorry, I feel like this deck might be a little stronger than the rest. Apologies if I was outside the scope. Untap, upkeep, draw. Play Nykthos as land for turn. We'll activate it for devotion is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Jesus. Okay, I'll make 19 green.
It's all good, brother. I moved my deck up a power level when I realized you were playing 6, and because I was going to play a deck that's like a step below this, and I kind of had a feeling it was going to end up like this, but I usually give people the benefit of the doubt.
Sorry, I tried to make sure you understood, but it's hard with new people, you know? I'll
Who's
cast
new?
Invasion of.
I'm
Well,
good,
I mean,
bro.
like you've
I'm
never
good.
played with
You're
me
good,
before.
brother. You're good, brother. I'm messing with you, man. I'm messing with you. I'm having fun.
I'll cast Invasion of Ikoria for X equals 3.
No effects.
That's good with everyone else. Okay. Blue player especially. I assume he's not responding. I can't hear you, Crest, if you're saying anything.
All right, yeah, you're good.
Okay.
I think he was talking to his lady.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna grab Dosen the Falling. Whoa. Dosen the Falling Leaf. So he says that players can only cast spells on their own turns.
Oh, damn.
And then I'm gonna play from hand a Crater Huff and attempt to kill everyone.
Thanks for the game.
GG's.
GG.